back here, or you can even come up here this time. Place for you here. So yeah. So in the chair with me today is Atle Søvik, and he wonders whether future is predetermined. And we'll find out, maybe. Let's see what happens. So I guess you know Atle already. He is a professor of systematic theology here at MF, and he just published a book. Do you want to show them the book? Here it is.
A book.
Yes, it has a wonderful title, I think, A Basic Theory of Everything. So it's, and I think that what we're going to hear today is part of that, or it's like an aspect of that. So please.
Thanks, and I have a handout, so I'm just sending it to you and you can pass around. So the title is Your Future Predetermined? And it might come as a surprise to hear that a majority of philosophers of time will say, yes, your future is predetermined. And the reason, the main reason why they think so is that they think it is implied by the theory of relativity, that even before you were born, everything that will happen later has already been settled. So a month ago, I was in Oxford on a conference on God and time, and I presented a paper with two arguments. The first argument was an objection to this argument from relativity, and the other argument was what I think is a new argument for indeterminism, or that your future is not predetermined. And nobody cared about my first argument, but a lot of people wanted to discuss the second one. And they all, I think everyone disagreed and had a lot of objections. And I thought, I don't think they've understood the argument, but I blame myself for not making it clear. And it was quite short, and it was based on just one paragraph in this book. So I thought this could be expanded into an article. So what I've done is to make an outline for an article, which is the handout you have now. And then I'm going to present it quite briefly, but I would love then to hear your objections, or if you think this was unclear, or you should say this way instead, or I understand this, because all of that will be good food for my future article. So then, on this handout, I start with the question, is the universe determined? And then these terms can be defined in different ways, but the most common way is to say that determinism means that there is only one possible content of the future, which is determined already before you were born. And then indeterminism will be the rejection of determinism. But there are very many different theories of determinism then explaining why, what makes it the case that the universe is either determined or indeterminate. Some people will think that this is an impossible question to answer, because they will say, well, there could always be the case that we can discover new and deeper layers of reality that will show us, oh, the world is determined after all, or the world is indeterminate after all. So it's an impossible question to answer. But I think this is the case with all our questions. It could always be the case that in the future we could learn new things that we didn't know and see that we were wrong. So I think we can answer the question, we can ask the question in the sense, what is best justified, or what do we have best reason to believe today? So that's the way we should understand the question. Some people think that the answer is obvious. At least I meet many people who say, well, quantum mechanics has told us that the world is indeterminate. And it used to be the case that the main theory of quantum mechanics was an indeterministic theory. But in recent years, there are two other theories or interpretations of quantum mechanics that have become quite popular, and they are both deterministic. So if you ask philosophers of physics, they will say it's an open question whether the world is determined or not. Some people will say, well, it's an irrelevant question, because if the world is determined, well, then we just have to do, it won't matter if it's indeterminate or determined. It's not the case that, oh, the world is determined, now I'll just sit down and wait to see what determinism does. What will it make for dinner today? You still have to make your choices and so on. So they say it's irrelevant. You live the exact same life, whether the world is determined or indeterminate. And of course, if the world is determined, well, then we just have to do what we do anyway. But if it's not determined, there are a lot of experiments where they test to see what is the effect on people if they believe that the world is either determined or indeterminate. So they divide a group of persons in half, and one half gets a lot of lectures on the world is determined, you have no free will, etc. And the other group gets the opposite. And then they get to do a lot of new tasks, and they see that people who think that there is no free will, everything is determined, they are much more likely to cheat and be aggressive. And there's a lot of interesting consequences that follow from what you believe about the world and about determinism. So I think it is an interesting question, which is relevant it's discussed in both biology and physics. It's discussed in philosophy of time. It's a very important question in the philosophy of free will, because some people, one half of the philosophers in the discussion of free will will say that we have to have an indeterminate world in order for there to be free will. Otherwise, there won't be any free will. Some disagree, but it's a big issue there. In philosophy of religion, it's a discussion on how God relates to time, whether God is in time and the future is open also for God, or whether God is outside of time and seeing the whole future already lying in front of us. And as I mentioned, then in everyday life, it can have existential consequences, whether you believe it really matters what I do now, or it's all settled anyway with the climate crisis or whatever. It's already determined. Okay. So in this article, then, I present a new argument for indeterminism, and I put it up with two premises and a conclusion. It's a logically valid argument here, so it means that if the premises are true, then you should accept the conclusion. But I'll try now just to share the main idea of the argument in a simple way. There are some more objections here on the paper that I won't be getting to, but try to explain the main idea. And the main idea is that, on the one hand, you have theories of determinism. They all operate at the micro level. They describe, there are many theories, but the main and the most popular theories, they describe determinism as laws of nature interacting with particles in the world, and that these laws of nature then determine what happens. But then it's a matter of particles and their mass and energy, spin and charge that determines everything that happens. On the other hand, you have at the macro level, there also clearly seems to be effects or states of affairs, etc., that have real effects. So, for instance, I can see a commercial about a movie or a dinner, and I think, oh, I want to see that. And it's so easy to come up with examples. And evolution is also a good example on there being selection. These are better fit for survival, etc. So it seems to be macro level causes that influence what will happen in the future. But it seems then that if there are causes at the macro level that has a real effect, then it can't be already determined at the micro level what will happen. Then it should be open at the micro level. Will this happen? Will that happen? Because then the macro level causes can have a real effect. If it's already determined at the micro level what will happen, then everything at the macro level will just be epiphenomena following along. But it seems, at least to me, then, that if it's determined at a micro level, we wouldn't expect this order that we see. It's not you look at the equations in physics and say, okay, this will give us plants and trees and animals and then dinosaurs, and they will die, and then there will. It seems not to follow from the equations at all. But if the equation makes it open what will happen, then we can understand why some macro structure would form over time, and they will start influencing what would happen. So that's the sort of core of the argument. But of course, you can come with some objections. And I think two main objections would be either that, well, the microdeterminism can scale up to the macro level. What happens can still determine, or the mechanisms at the micro level can determine what happens at the macro level. That's one objection. Or you could say, well, there could be another theory of determinism that works, just operates at the macro level. But my response to that is to say, I don't think that there are any plausible theories for that, how that would happen. But of course, it could be that there's something I don't know that I don't know, and maybe you have some suggestion. But that's my response when the audience said, well, it could be like this or that. And then my response was, well, tell me how that works in detail. Show me that theory or how that would work. Because, as I said, the main theories are theories of determinism that only work at the micro level. So I put some objections on the handout, and I won't go through them all. I'll just mention that I thought of one new one today, and that was that it could be that some other scholars have already presented a similar argument. Namely, there are some who say that in the world, we have something called top-down causation, causes at the micro level that determines what happens at the micro level, which would be similar to my argument. But the theories that I have read about this, they say that there is this unique type of causation called top-down causation, which they believe is a unique kind of causation. I don't think that there's a unique kind of causation. I say that it's the same kind happening everywhere, But when these micro effects turn into either this micro effects, turn into either that or this or that macro structure, that will have effects, causal effects at the macro level. But I have to write that in and check if maybe I'm just using other names and people have already presented a similar theory. But as far as I know, this is a new argument. But of course, someone could have. I did present it once to a very famous philosopher of time. It's called Craig Callender. It's fantastic that Professor Callender works on time. And I said, well, how do you explain? Because he believes that we all just live in a block universe. The future is all already settled. And I said, how do you explain evolution and how does selection of species, etc. How does that make sense if everything is just one frozen gigantic block universe? And he said, I don't think it's a problem, but he didn't have any response. So I think it's a new argument. And I read most of his work and I haven't found it anywhere, but I'll continue looking. But I think I'll stop now. That's 12 minutes. And I'll hear your responses.
Great, thank you.
I'll sit and take notes.